In the northeastern United States stands an ancient city that once witnessed the birth of a nation, Philadelphia, the city of the Founding Fathers, where the Declaration of Independence was signed and the Constitution was crafted. A city renowned worldwide for the iconic Liberty Bell, historic cobblestone streets that echo with centuries of history, and the timeless spirit of freedom that inspired democracy across the globe. Tourists flock here by the millions to walk through Independence Hall, to marvel at the Reading Terminal Market's bustling energy, and to photograph the towering modern skyscrapers that represent America's economic might and architectural ambition. But behind the carefully curated tourist attractions, beyond the grandeur of historical monuments, and beneath the gleaming facades of corporate headquarters, there exists another Philadelphia entirely. One that is rarely highlighted in travel brochures, never featured in promotional videos, and systematically hidden from the consciousness of comfortable Americans. This is the Philadelphia of forgotten souls and abandoned dreams. In narrow alleys where sunlight never penetrates, under crumbling bridges where traffic roars overhead, in the forgotten corners of city parks where children once played safely, there are thousands who wander without direction or purpose, sleep without roofs or security, and exist without certainty about their next meal or their survival through another brutal night. These are the people who have lost their place in the social fabric, lost their voice in America's democratic promise, and sometimes even lost their very identity in this harsh urban landscape where compassion has become a scarce commodity. In this historic city where liberty was first proclaimed to the world, where the phrase, "all men are created equal," was penned into immortal words, more than 4.0 human beings live without the most basic freedom, the freedom of having a home, a place of safety, a space to call their own. And that staggering number represents just the visible surface of a much deeper, more troubling story that challenges everything we believe about American exceptionalism and the promise of opportunity for all. The homeless population of Philadelphia represents far more than mere statistics buried in government reports or academic studies. They are an integral, though hidden, part of this city's complex fabric, its unwritten history, its ongoing moral struggles, and its uncertain future in an era of increasing inequality. In the exploration that follows, we will attempt to listen to their voices with genuine attention, not to judge their circumstances with middle-class assumptions, not to offer empty pity that salves our consciences, but to truly understand their reality in all its complexity and pain. Because behind every forgotten face weathered by exposure to the elements, scarred by violence and neglect, there exists a complete human story worth hearing, a story that challenges everything we think we know about merit, opportunity, and the American dream that promises prosperity to those who work hard and play by the rules. Philadelphia's homelessness crisis represents a moral emergency that has been decades in the making. But in recent years, it has escalated from urgent to absolutely catastrophic, from a manageable social problem to a humanitarian disaster unfolding in plain sight. Every single night, as comfortable families settle into their warm homes and children sleep safely in their beds, an estimated 4.0 people find themselves without shelter in this historic city that once symbolized hope and freedom to the world. Of those thousands of displaced Americans, approximately 1,200 are living entirely unsheltered, not in temporary facilities, not in emergency shelters, not in transitional housing, but directly on unforgiving sidewalks where winter winds cut through worn clothing, in dangerous parks where predators hunt the vulnerable, and under highway bridges that offer minimal protection from rain, snow, and the contempt of passing motorists who prefer not to see the human wreckage below. But these official numbers, compiled by organizations struggling to track a constantly shifting population, only scratch the surface of a much larger tragedy that extends into every neighborhood and touches every economic class. Many thousands more exist in what social workers and researchers term hidden homelessness, sleeping temporarily on friends' couches until their welcome inevitably expires, cramped uncomfortably in cars that serve as mobile shelters until parking regulations or mechanical failures force them onto the streets, or crowded into places so inadequate they cannot remotely be called home by any reasonable definition. Who are these invisible Americans whose suffering we have learned to ignore? They are former factory workers whose manufacturing jobs disappeared when corporations moved production overseas in pursuit of cheaper labor and higher profits. They are military veterans who returned from foreign wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other conflict zones, carrying invisible trauma that a grateful nation promised to treat, but ultimately abandoned to overwhelmed bureaucracies and insufficient funding. They are LGBTQ teenagers and young adults kicked out of their family homes by parents and relatives who cannot accept their sexual orientation or gender identity, forced to choose between authenticity and shelter. They are single mothers working multiple minimum wage jobs but still unable to afford Philadelphia's skyrocketing rental costs, facing impossible choices between paying rent and buying food for their children. They are elderly Americans whose Social Security benefits prove inadequate for basic survival in an economy that has left them behind, and yes, tragically, they include children whose only crime was being born into poverty in the wealthiest nation in human history. None of these human beings ever dreamed of a life spent on concrete and cardboard, searching garbage cans for food, begging strangers for enough money to survive another day. But multiple interconnected crises, devastating economic inequality, the complete disappearance of affordable housing, an overwhelmed and underfunded mental health system, and the ongoing opioid epidemic that has claimed hundreds of thousands of American lives, have converged to create a perfect storm of human suffering in Philadelphia that mirrors similar disasters in cities across the United States. Rent prices throughout Philadelphia have been climbing relentlessly, far faster than wages for working-class and middle-class families. Affordable housing has become virtually extinct, eliminated by gentrification that prioritizes profit over people, by zoning laws that favor luxury development, and by political systems that respond to wealthy donors rather than desperate constituents. Social assistance programs, when they exist at all, arrive too late to prevent homelessness and prove woefully inadequate for the scale of human need they are supposed to address. This crisis represents far more than a housing issue. It serves as a stark reflection of deep-rooted systemic inequality that permeates every aspect of American society and challenges the fundamental myths we tell ourselves about merit and opportunity. This is not about people who refuse to work or made poor life choices that deserve punishment. This is about opportunities distributed unequally along lines of race, class, gender, and geography. This is about a system where housing has been transformed from a human right into a luxury commodity, accessible only to those with substantial economic resources. When basic shelter becomes unaffordable for working people, when full-time employment no longer guarantees housing security, homelessness can strike anyone, even those who yesterday looked exactly like us, lived exactly like us, worked exactly like us, and dreamed exactly the same dreams of security and prosperity. Imagine, if you can bear to do so, the brutal daily reality of waking every morning with no roof over your head, no alarm clock to provide structure to your day, no hot coffee to warm your spirits and caffeine to energize your body, no private bathroom for the basic human dignity of personal hygiene. Just an endless sky above that offers no protection and bone-chilling cold that penetrates every layer of worn, dirty clothing donated by well-meaning strangers. On the unforgiving streets of Philadelphia, daily routine bears no resemblance to the structured lives most Americans take for granted. There are no career goals to pursue, no educational advancement to plan, no family dinners to anticipate. Instead, routine revolves entirely around survival in its most primitive, desperate form, the same survival challenges that humans faced thousands of years ago, but now played out against the backdrop of unprecedented wealth and technological sophistication. Mornings begin with the urgent, often humiliating search for a safe place to relieve yourself, perhaps the public library if security guards haven't barred the homeless from entering, perhaps a McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts if the minimum wage staff shows unexpected compassion rather than following corporate policies designed to exclude the poor. Sometimes it means walking miles to find a facility that won't turn you away, delaying other survival activities, and burning precious energy. Then begins the relentless, exhausting hunt for sustenance that will consume hours of every day, standing in seemingly endless lines at soup kitchens run by overwhelmed charitable organizations, hoping for leftover food from local churches whose congregations may or may not have remembered to volunteer, or simply praying for the increasingly rare mercy of strangers passing by who might spare some change or an unwanted sandwich. Every single step taken on these hostile streets carries inherent risks that... In the northern corner of Philadelphia lies a neighborhood called Kensington, where the homelessness crisis intersects tragically with an even darker American tragedy: the opioid epidemic that has devastated communities across the United States, claiming more lives than the Vietnam War and continuing to destroy families daily. Some public health experts and journalists call Kensington ground zero for America's drug crisis, though similar scenes of devastation can be found in cities from coast to coast. Walking through Kensington feels like entering a war zone where the casualties are American citizens and the enemy is despair itself. The sidewalks are littered with discarded syringes like deadly autumn leaves, creating hazards for children walking to school and families trying to maintain normal lives amid chaos. The neighborhood's shadowy alleys and abandoned buildings shelter bodies hunched over in drug-induced stupors, lost somewhere between unbearable emotional pain and temporary chemical euphoria that provides brief escape from trauma, mental illness, and hopelessness. Among Kensington's walking wounded are many individuals who have not only lost their homes and families, but have also lost control of their bodies and minds to powerful addictive substances that rewire brain chemistry and make recovery extraordinarily difficult without comprehensive medical and psychological support. The tragedy is that opioid dependency often begins in the most innocent, medically appropriate places: prescription painkillers provided by doctors for legitimate workplace injuries, surgical recovery, or chronic pain conditions. But when insurance companies limit coverage, when doctors become reluctant to prescribe adequate pain medication due to regulatory pressure, when prescription pills become too expensive or unavailable, many people discover that illegal street drugs like heroin and fentanyl provide the same pain relief at lower cost. What begins as medical treatment for real physical suffering can spiral rapidly into devastating addiction when legitimate medications become inaccessible through proper medical channels. Once addiction takes hold and rewrites brain chemistry, few individuals can escape without intensive professional help, medical supervision, and long-term support systems. But that crucial assistance rarely arrives in time to prevent complete life devastation, family destruction, and descent into homelessness. Philadelphia's mental health system, like those in cities across America, remains chronically understaffed, severely underfunded, and burdened with months-long waiting lists that offer little hope to people facing immediate crises. Many individuals in the homeless population suffer simultaneously from serious, untreated mental illnesses that make daily survival even more challenging. Schizophrenia, that creates auditory hallucinations and paranoid thoughts. Post-traumatic stress disorder from combat experience or childhood abuse. Bipolar disorder with extreme mood swings that interfere with employment and relationships. And major depression that makes getting out of bed feel impossible even when your bed is cardboard on a sidewalk. But without a permanent address for mail delivery, without health insurance or Medicaid coverage, and without proper identification documents that are easily lost or stolen on the streets, these vulnerable individuals cannot access therapy, psychiatric medications, or treatment programs that might save their lives and restore their ability to function in society. As a result, many are left wandering the streets indefinitely with psychological wounds that never heal, flashbacks that never stop, voices that never quiet, and emotional pain that feels unbearable without chemical numbing. Street drugs offer the only available escape for mental anguish, albeit at a catastrophic cost that includes increased risk of overdose death, criminal charges, violence, sexual assault, and further marginalization from mainstream society. Drug addiction and mental illness are not the primary root causes of homelessness in America. Those causes are economic inequality, lack of affordable housing, inadequate wages, and insufficient social safety nets. But addiction and mental health issues create compound effects that trap people in vicious cycles that become increasingly impossible to break without comprehensive long-term intervention and support. When someone loses control of their mental state or becomes dependent on substances, society typically responds by backing away rather than stepping forward to provide assistance. Stigma replaces sympathy, fear overcomes compassion, and we become quicker to judge individual moral failings than to understand the complex social, economic, and medical factors that contribute to addiction and mental illness. But here is the honest truth that makes comfortable Americans deeply uncomfortable. None of these suffering human beings chose to live this way, or want to continue existing in such degrading circumstances. No child grows up dreaming of becoming an addict, sleeping in doorways, begging for money, searching through garbage for food. No teenager fantasizes about spending nights on sidewalks, using public bathrooms for hygiene, facing daily humiliation and rejection. They are victims of interconnected systems, economic, medical, social, legal, that failed to catch them when they stumbled and fell, failed to provide adequate support when they needed help most, and failed to offer realistic pathways back to stability and dignity. In addressing this multifaceted crisis that touches every aspect of human experience, what is needed extends far beyond temporary band-aid solutions like emergency tents or single meals from charitable organizations. What is desperately required is access to comprehensive rehabilitation programs that address both addiction and underlying trauma, sustained psychological support that continues long enough to create real healing, job training programs that provide marketable skills, affordable housing that doesn't consume entire paychecks, and most importantly, genuine opportunities for healing, redemption, and reintegration into communities that will accept rather than reject people with histories of homelessness and addiction. Amid the overwhelming darkness of Philadelphia's homelessness crisis, there flickers a small but persistent light of hope and innovation, one that refuses to be extinguished despite countless setbacks and seemingly impossible challenges. Because this historic city is not merely a place where people lose hope, dreams, and dignity, It has also become a place where hope begins to rebuild itself slowly, one human life at a time, through programs that treat homeless individuals as complete human beings deserving of respect rather than problems to be managed or moved along. One of the most significant breakthroughs in addressing chronic homelessness has emerged from a simple but revolutionary principle known as housing first, which represents a fundamental shift in how society approaches homelessness and its complex underlying causes. This innovative approach does not wait for someone to overcome addiction, find employment, complete treatment programs, or prove their worthiness through compliance with multiple requirements and behavioral changes. Instead, housing first provides stable, permanent housing immediately and unconditionally. Because secure shelter serves as the essential foundation that makes all other recovery efforts possible and effective. Organizations like Project Home, Pathways to Housing PA, and Valley Youth House have demonstrated conclusively through years of data collection that when people are housed in stable, safe environments with appropriate support services, they become far better equipped to overcome substance abuse, access mental health treatment, maintain employment, rebuild family relationships, and contribute positively to their communities. The evidence supporting housing first approaches is overwhelming and undeniable. People who receive immediate housing are significantly more likely to remain housed long-term, dramatically less likely to use expensive emergency services like hospital emergency rooms and police interventions, more likely to comply with medical treatment for chronic conditions, and more successful at maintaining sobriety and mental health stability. In neighborhoods featuring innovative programs like Francis House of Peace, formerly homeless individuals now live independently in their own small but complete apartments, complete with keys that provide security and privacy, private doors that can be locked for safety, and their own names on mailboxes that provide identity and belonging. With these simple elements that most Americans take completely for granted, comes the gradual restoration of human dignity that homelessness had systematically stripped away through daily humiliation and dehumanization. Beyond providing basic housing, social innovations throughout Philadelphia create environments where healing and growth become possible. Programs like Broad Street Ministry create welcoming spaces where people are addressed by their chosen names rather than dismissed as problems to be solved or moved along. Here, genuine relationships develop slowly between staff, volunteers, and participants. Trust grows despite past betrayals, and healing becomes possible in an atmosphere of acceptance and respect. Mobile medical and mental health clinics now reach individuals who cannot travel to traditional healthcare facilities, bringing doctors, nurses, social workers, and mental health counselors directly to city sidewalks, encampments, and other locations where homeless individuals gather. These programs recognize that expecting people struggling with basic survival to navigate complex healthcare systems represents an unrealistic barrier that prevents treatment of serious medical become real for every person, regardless of their economic circumstances. The solutions exist. We have the knowledge, resources, and successful models needed to end homelessness. What we lack is the collective will to prioritize human dignity over profit, to invest in prevention rather than punishment, to create systems that lift people up rather than keeping them down. But that can change, and it must change, because our humanity depends on how we treat those who need our help the most.